Good afternoon, and here's another episode of Up the River and Going Home. So, what are we talking about today? Oh, we're going to be doing a little air quality. We're going to be talking, a couple other few things. Fact that Philadelphia is defying all the critics. We'll see what happens. So, why are we talking air quality? Because actually today's not a bad day here in Minnesota. Well, I don't know how many of you guys know this, but I am a member of the Twin Cities Meteorological Society. I'm actually the secretary, go figure, one of the officers. But last night, we did have a meeting, and the meeting, that was based off the big little smoke plume that came over us between July and August. The one that sort of, set record low air quality for pretty much all of Minnesota, parts of northwestern Ontario, and even for portions of Iowa, going towards Wisconsin. I mean, the air quality, that was bad. You could even smell it inside the plant during the day. That's how bad it was. But as for why we discussed all of it, why we had that discussion, because not only did we have to worry about the air quality itself, which was a record, and, pretty much everything just lined up perfectly for that, but also the fact that, air quality alerts were out for so long that they actually had to redo some of the wording here in Minnesota, as well as do some of the presentation on the air quality from the Pollution Control Agency. Because, let's face it, we're used to maybe getting a little ozone here and there, maybe a little problem here and there, but not necessarily, going up towards, California-type levels. So, when we had those style alerts, the first generic stuff they presented, wasn't too great. But then once they started actually putting in details, like how bad it got, who was getting the worst of it, I can even explain that to most of my coworkers. There's no problem. Side note, actually at the plant, they did have me do heat stress type of forecasting, like just broad brush weekly outlook type deal, so they can plan ahead for what could be, what days they might need to take extra precautions for shipping and receiving. Because let's face it, those guys we bust our ass on our line, but they really bust their ass in some really bad heat in those trucks. And the reason they wanted that heat stress is because above a certain point, you're going to have to give extra brakes, you're going to have to be sure the water's there, you have to check to be sure they don't end up passing out in the trucks. Because, heat exhaustion and heat stroke are actually pretty valid concerns for what you have to deal with in a workplace like that, or, just in general over, like, say, at Bayport. Even though Bayport didn't take to that thing type yet, next year we'll see, try to coax them into it. But in the meantime, one of the things that, you have to be sure about with the air quality, is the fact that, some people handle it without too much of a problem. Me, not too much of a problem until it gets really high. But there are others that, especially like some more sensitive asthmatics, oh boy, you want to talk about a major problem. And, Minnesota, usually you don't have those type of problems. Like I said before, it's like, this was an unprecedented event for Minnesota last July and August. But yet, most people in Minnesota, it's like, occasional ozone day, maybe, a little forest fire here or there, no big deal. Now pretty much pretty much the whole side of, east side of Lake Manitoba going up, and also areas of the Lake of the Woods, sending tremendous smoke plumes down, that type of stuff is just tremendous. And one of the things I had to add to the heat stress forecast, at least, the one I did for Cottage Grove, I actually did try to time the frontal pass, just generally. I knew for a 5-day broad brush, especially further out, you couldn't really nail the perfect timing, but I tried to get, what days are going to be the highest risk and stuff, and that figured to be the most useful. That's what they wanted, is nearest day type risk, so that's what I did, is I just basically, trying to figure out, with the smoke plumes that were out there, it's like, okay, who is going to be, when are we going to be most likely feeling it, and try to focus in on those days. And I did that, and, it actually did generally work. I don't know if that's what safety, I don't know if the safety department, if that's what they wanted, or a plant manager, but they ended up liking it because, as I said, shipping and receiving, it's, you got to be able to breathe in that in the heat, even though it did bring a temperature down a couple degrees. And the worst part was actually it was either really hot and sticky during that time, or behind the cold front it became really thick and smoky. So there wasn't as much temperature contrast, but your air quality pretty much went from, to basically, I don't know how to describe it. It'd basically be like going from Florida over to being a smoke shifter at a scout camp. It just wasn't gonna work. It wasn't gonna work. But for anybody breathing around, and also remember the other thing: when the winds go north and northwest, Twin Cities was one thing, but like in Cottage Grove, we've got the other problem of we got refineries that I'm gonna be passing by right here. It's pretty much the refineries over by 61 and 494 area. There's a bunch of big ones here, and let's face it, they add their own smell on top of things. And you can add a whole bunch of smoke, add a little bit of photochemical action, changing it to even some worse type of chemical smog. Look, what exact chemicals, to be bluntly honest? I'm not Dr. William Brune with my free radicals, so I don't know. So, you'd have to ask somebody like him what the exact chemicals were, but let's just say it wasn't good for anybody's lungs, much less mine, so. But, it was an experience. Now I know what it feels like in California, or in the worst days of, say, Pittsburgh. Well, not quite the worst days in Pittsburgh. Some of those were god-awful ugly. That stuff you're talking, like China and India type of smog. But, that's, when you get that type of trouble, people were actually not driving to work as much, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And let's face it, with everybody having not sure about being able to go to the office anyway, thanks to the pandemic, that made it even a little easier because everybody was already geared up to be able to work at home. And one thing going forward that will be nice, when we have another one of those bad air quality days, also known as Spare the Air days in Toronto. But when we have another one of those days, what will be good is when we can actually be able to switch to work from home for those that can work from home, and make it easier for them just to, take some cars off the road without anybody losing any work. And, that's good for everybody. Except maybe some of the coffee vendors. But, to be bluntly honest, that's why you also have delivery services. Even though, let's face it, why some people get Starbucks delivered when you can actually just do it at home in a coffee machine. That's a different matter. Then again, I'm not really a coffee drinker anyway. Yeah, I drink a little tea here and there, basically iced tea, but even a little hot tea once in a blue moon with a little lemon, a little honey. But it is what it is, At least, that was also part of that big heat dome that North America had earlier this summer, especially North America. We're talking basically Portland, Seattle, going up towards British Columbia, where they set that record. 49.6 degrees Celsius. We're talking about 120 Fahrenheit. Now, why didn't the OPSITE go 50? I'm not sure. I wish it would have. If you're going to go that high, might as well shoot the moon. But I guess it couldn't get that last trump card on the hard table. But, still, that's damn hot, and those fires only added to the smoke. Our main forest fire smoke was from Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. But anyway, that heat problem that they had, that actually translated to a different problem, but something's more that California is more actually a part of. They have that little problem called severe flooding going on, and Reason why is because they've had several what are called atmospheric rivers. We used to call them the Pineapple Express. And either way, it's basically you've got a huge plume of moisture coming up from the Central and South Pacific, from the equatorial and Central Pacific, coming up in big waves, dumping all types of rain, a little bit of wet snow up at about 50 over above 2,000 meters. That's about 7,000 feet. But that type of stuff, it's caused all types of problems. I mean, one storm alone dumped between 200 and 400 millimeters of rain. For anybody keeping score in the English system, we're talking between 8 and 16 inches of rain from one storm going into the mountains. And, all that water going into the Fraser Valley, into this place, the Fraser and Coquihalla Valleys. Let's just say the road damage, that was quite ugly. I mean, the air quality that they had from all the high heat and the fires was one thing, but now they're suffering through some major flooding problems. I mean, we're talking almost, they're comparing it to 86, which was quite like an early, actually, I don't know if it's like 86 or 80, but I mean like 1980, and they're saying it's even worse than that. So, and that's just nasty. Hopefully everybody will be able to recover eventually. Unfortunately, they do have a couple more pineapple jets coming through that, are going to cause some bigger problems. And hopefully they'll be able to figure it out. Hopefully they'll be able to get everything to calm down a little bit, dry out a little bit, and to be able to get the rivers back under control. Because, I mean, you've got pretty much most of the eastern suburbs, like Abbotsford and over towards Burnaby, even towards Hope. I mean, basically they are being devastated right now, and in a really bad way. I mean, we're talking, massive Mississippi flood or massive Susquehanna flood type deal, And the farmers there, between the farmers there and roads that are just completely wiped out, including major highways like the main Trans-Canada TCH1 going towards Vancouver, as well as the Coquihalla Highway, which is like Highway 5 going up towards, from Hope, going over the mountains, over towards Kelowna and Kamloops. And you also have, by the way, that's a toll road. And I think they also, Weather Channel has a TV reality show type thing from up there that they put on from up there. But that's besides the point. But I mean, several other highways are in major bad shape. I mean, they're saying the Coquihalla Highway could reopen by February maybe. I mean, they've gotten a couple stretches of the TCH1 open, but only one lane each direction. Even then, that's wavering with each extra wave of moisture. So it's just not a good day at all. Not a good month at all of November going into December for out there. Christmas, God help them. I'm thinking they just want some dry days out in the lower mainland. It's just out of this world nuts. But, with all that said, the other big problem with the flooding out there is, unlike, say, here in the U.S., where we have the different river forecast centers that can issue floods and flash flood warnings and warnings for that type of stuff. I mean, the Middle Atlantic River Forecast Center is the one that basically takes care of most of Pennsylvania, southern tier New York, New Jersey, and parts of Virginia. Out here we have the Upper Mississippi River Valley Forecast Center here in the Twin Cities, and that pretty much takes care of here, La Crosse, even the St. Croix going through Stillwater, and up that way. But out there in British Columbia, and actually for most of Canada, any type of flood control measures are usually just done river system by river system, if that. Even like, say, the Fraser Valley, they have a bigger problem because of actual river systems. You actually have you have flood control done by each and every little town and township. Not necessarily done by, done at least on a river system basis, if not a provincial basis, like we do here in the U.S. So, I mean, when somebody puts up a dike, it's like, okay, you got one, but what about my town, because that's, diking river. When you dike a river like that, you gotta remember all that water's gotta go somewhere. And that's one of the big problems they have out in British Columbia right now, well, their infrastructure, is the fact that, they basically, with the town-by-town stuff, you have dikes failing all over the place, where if they would have pooled their resources together into, like, say, one big resource center for the whole Fraser Valley, they could have actually saved themselves a lot of problems, and they could have actually, maybe even kept some highways from washing out. Not saying that you could have perfectly done that with how much rain they got, but could have made it a little bit more possible to at least try to channel it as best as possible, and also to be able to forecast it, because Environment Canada got Environment Canada, they got their hands tied behind their back a little bit with this. They can predict the heavy rainfall warnings, but the question is, even if you have the heavy rainfall warnings, if you don't have people knowing how to respond to it, because they're all doing the river and flood forecasting, real screwy and not in a non-organized basis, yeah, you're still going to have problems. And that's what they've been experiencing in British Columbia right now, is basically just about a worst case scenario. So hopefully they're able to get their act together up there. Their soccer team is actually quite good. They've gotten their act together. Why can't the river systems? Well, hopefully they can after this. Maybe the Liberal government there, as well as the coalition government in BC, can actually get that done. But then again, when I talked to Vancouver soccer team, but we're also going to talk MLS in general. Yeah, at least weather surveillance wise, they're generally pretty good. I haven't had too many complaints. But I will say that when it comes to stuff, when it comes to stuff participating in the playoffs, I mean, let's face it, Minnesota, we didn't do so well. We got the first goal, we didn't look too bad, but after that, it seems like the guys just ran out of gas, which is not good. I know they're a better team than that, but they just couldn't hold up. But the team that could hold up through this mess, my older brother's team, the Philadelphia Union, they pulled off, a literally last-minute goal. I mean, we're talking, a couple seconds left in overtime. Pulled off an amazing goal, and then in the shootout the following week against Nashville, that was a couple days ago. Oh, boy. You want to talk about nuts. I mean, Philly was able to hit 2 goals, 2 of them, but Nashville got both of them stuffed. I mean, it's not the strongest part of the game for the otherwise goaltender of the year for Philadelphia to do PKs, but let's face it, he was on. He blocked the first 2 shots quite handily. The next 2 players for Nashville skied him. Didn't even make the shot, so it ended up being like 3-0 victory for Philadelphia in PKs. It wasn't pretty. But, they're going into the final this week, and they're actually hosting because New England lost in penalty kicks. They're going to be, Philadelphia's going to be hosting NYCFC, aka the Yankees of soccer. And they actually do play at Yankee Stadium, by the way, which is a big POS because they should have their own stadium now, being in existence for like 5-6 years. It's supposed to be an MLS requirement. They complain that they have some problems with the New York trying to get stuff approved. I mean, come on. You just didn't pad the right people's pockets and city council the right way there. You should have been able to get something done by now. But, you know, that all said, it's Philly versus NYCFC, which is part owned by the Yankees, part owned by, I think it's Man City that owns parts of them over in England. So they'll be going up against the Union down at Philly's place, Subaru Park, on Sunday. Winner basically goes to the MLS Cup final. And hey, if Minnesota can't make it, let's face it, Philadelphia, it would be awesome if they can make it. Then, you know, not only because it's just my older brother's team would be able to celebrate. Yeah, I do like Philly sports. Most of every other sport except for soccer. You know, being a season ticket holder, you have to go for the home team up here. I mean, that's just a given. But when you're talking, you know, Philadelphia Union, you know, going for a title, a lot of your analysts pretty much don't have this thing where they don't really like Philadelphia. They're too blue collar for most people, especially Alexi Lawless. He hates Philadelphia for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe it's because it's not a fancy, playing team from a fancy place like New York, Philadelphia, or even Atlanta, you know? I mean, come on, it's Philadelphia. It's blue collar. It's not pretty soccer, but they get the job done. I mean, at least Taylor Twellman, he will at least give teams credit when they're winning. He even did that to Minnesota United when we were on our hot streak earlier in the year. It's like, yeah, he will give respect when you're actually deserving of it. And, you know, I'd say he might be betting on Philly. I don't know where he's betting, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt he's going to try to maybe think about betting on Philly over NYCFC, especially at home. If it was on the road at Yankee Stadium, that'd be a different matter, but at home, I think it shouldn't be an issue. The Union should be able to take that 1-0, 2-0, whatever. It only counts if you win this time of the year. As for out west, you've got Portland, and you've also got the major underdog of it all, Real Salt Lake from Salt Lake City. I mean, their ownership is still up in the air. They basically got a manager tossed at him, and he's actually doing a good job with what he has. They're an inspired team. Yes, they're going to be going up to Portland to be able to face the mighty Timber Army. But let's face it, I would love it. I mean, even the critics have their problems with Salt Lake City, but at least they're willing to give them a little bit credit more than they are Philadelphia. Well, always, as I said, anti-Philadelphia bias. Gotta love it. But it would be great if we had a Philadelphia Salt Lake MLS final over at Subaru Park, just to be able to shut up people like Alexi Lawless. And it would even be better if Philadelphia could take it all, because not only would that be the ultimate screw you to some of the MLS press, but let's face it, that also puts Philadelphia back in the CONCACAF Champions League to try to better their semifinal finish from this year. And, you know, wouldn't it be something that the first MLS team to actually go all the way and actually win it would be from Philadelphia? We'll see what happens, though. In the meantime, yeah, I'm finally home, so that's all for now. And have a good afternoon. Bye.